Good evening and welcome to the second community consultation event for the former Wisley Airfield. My name is Andonis Pazaru and I'm the Community and Green Infrastructure Project Manager working for Taylor Wimpey, and I'll be your chair this evening. So how will this session work? The session will last approximately 2 hours. At about 7:30, there will be an opportunity to take some questions and we will do our best to answer those. If you could kindly submit all of your questions using the Q&A button as shown on your screen, myself and the rest of the team will do our best to answer those. Please be assured, however, if due to time restraints, if we don't answer your questions this evening, we are fully committed to publishing a Q&A document next week, Friday, the 27th of November. Please note this session will be recorded. It's very much our intentions to upload this evening's event to our dedicated website for the former Wisley Airfield, which is www.wisleyairfield.com. Furthermore, if you didn't have the opportunity to attend our previous community consultation events in July, you will find those recordings on our website. We'll also be undertaking the same event this Saturday from 10 o'clock, so do feel free to attend that meeting as well. Most importantly, we really would love to hear back from you and receive your feedback. So after the events, a feedback form will be sent to you, and we will also be uploading that feedback form onto our project website. So what will you see this evening? So this consultation event represents a key part of our second chapter of engagement for the former Wisley Airfield. Today, we'll provide you with an overview of the initial draft master plan and how that's evolved since the July events. We'll also show you how we've responded and evolved that master plan since then. As I mentioned, about 7:30, we look forward to taking your questions and love to hear what you have to say about our emerging plans. We will be hosting another series of online consultation events in early 2021 before we submit an outline application for the site in the second quarter of 2021 next year. So again, hopefully by summer of 2021, we will be submitting our outline application. This is just a quick overview of some of the discussion topics this evening. And without further ado, I'll introduce you to Lee Davis, our Technical Director, who will introduce the team.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for your time today. As mentioned by Antonis, my name is Lee Davis, and I'm the Technical Director at Taylor Wimpey Major Developments and the Project Director for this proposed development. We are one of the biggest residential developers in the UK, building over 15,000 homes every year. As well as homes, we provide green spaces, infrastructure, including schools and community facilities, local amenities to benefit both new and existing communities. We're a responsible developer and we want to create great places for people to live, work and enjoy. To achieve this, we're committed to working together with existing communities and local authorities to create a new and exciting sustainable development. Our sites are not just about housing, but the investment into new and existing communities. We're very proud to say that last year, Taylor Wimpey invested over £445 million in local communities to fund improvements and build new facilities. Joining me on the former Wisley Airfield project are an experienced and dedicated Taylor Wimpey team, including Antonis, who you heard from earlier, Camille Saw, our planning manager, and James Newton, also planning manager, who isn't presenting today. I'm also pleased to advise that we've partnered with Vivid Housing Group to deliver 40% of the much needed affordable housing in the area. May I introduce you to John Waterfield from Vivid Homes?
Yes, thanks, Lee. Yes, Vivid are very excited to be working with Taylor Wimpey on this really sustainable site. Vivid is a medium-sized housing association providing housing for people in housing need. Our vision is to provide more homes and bright futures by helping our customers improve their life chances and well-being. We're a leading provider of affordable homes and housing relating services and support to 70,000 of our customers in the south of England. We have about 31,000 homes spanning Hampshire, Surrey, Berkshire, and expanding now into West Sussex. We are planning to build about 17,000 homes over the next 10 years and 1,200 of those over the next year alone. So thank you very much and hope you enjoy the evening.
Thank you, John. The Taylor Wimpey's consultant team, who you'll see on this slide here, have been working very hard over the last few months to put together options and proposals for your consideration and input. We'll be happy to accept questions after the presentation. Once again, thank you for joining us tonight, and let me hand you back to Antonis.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, John. So we're now going to run through a bit about the site context. So I'll shortly hand you over to Camille Saw. However, please do, should you have any questions throughout this presentation, please do click on the Q&A box and submit those questions. Thank you. Camille?
Thanks, Antonis, and good evening, everyone. This is our master plan boundary, which many of you will be familiar with. It reflects the boundary of policy A35 and includes additional land owned by Taylor Wimpey to the north. The land in the blue and pink is represented by CBRE and Hallam, respectively. We have a landowner working group with both parties to ensure the master plan is developed as a cohesive whole. Our vision is working together to deliver our sustainable community. So what does this mean? It means we are working to communicate, engage and consult with you all in an open and transparent manner. This includes working with our delivery partner Vivid, who you heard from earlier, Guildford Borough Council, Surrey County Council, you as residents, the wider community and stakeholders. We are pushing to be as truly sustainable as we can from the perspective of climate change, biodiversity, transport and health and well-being. We want to bring this all together to deliver a new community which is centred around placemaking, is forward-thinking, has a strong legacy and is exemplar. By doing so, we aim to provide benefits to and integrate with the existing community surrounding the site. Setting the planning policy baseline for us is the adopted local plan, as well as the emerging Lovelace Neighbourhood Plan and supporting supplementary planning guidance, which includes the Strategic Development Framework, SPD. As set out in our first public consultation, the adopted local plan sets the principle of development on this site through policy A35, which seeks to deliver approximately 2,000 homes and approximately 100 extra care units on the site, as well as a suite of supporting non-residential uses. As set out previously, this will also include a large amount of open green space, which our team will touch upon later. Thank you, Adonis.
Thanks, Camille.
The delivery of non-residential uses will be included within an infrastructure delivery plan, a document we are currently working on. Its aim is to coordinate the intended infrastructure delivery on-site and off-site, as well as across all three land parcels within policy A35. We will be working closely with all our key stakeholders in the coordination of this document, including Guildford Borough Council, Surrey County Council, Highways England and the CCG, to name a few. This document will then guide Section 106 legal agreements and planning conditions if the development is approved. It will ensure the delivery of transport initiatives, education, healthcare and open space. I understand this might be a complex area for a few of the residents, so I'm happy to take any further questions on this at the Q&A stage.
Thanks, Camille.
Thanks.
Wonderful. So chapter 1 of our consultation. So just taking you quickly through the timeline of our planning and consultation. We have just concluded our chapter 1 engagement, which included the events in July. We have also had our first design review panel in August with Design South East. And as explained at the last consultation event in the next step slides, we have now submitted our stub road and enabling works application. So they are just currently being determined, due hopefully December, January next year. We're now in chapter 2 of our engagement, and that commences with this evening's event. In December of this year, we're hoping to have our second design review panel. Before we repeat another round of consultation early January, hopefully, and then with our final design review panel in February. As I mentioned, we're just running through our engagement. We're in the middle at the moment, so please do provide feedback wherever you can. So some of the key facts then from the last consultation events in July, we had 228 members of the community that attended. We received 47 online feedback forms, so thank you to all of those that did provide their feedback. We have also, as of September, we received just under 3,000 unique visitors to our project website, where you'll find a host of information relating to our plans for the former Wisley Airfield. And indeed, we've continued to engage with the community at large. So following the feedback that we received from those 47 respondents, we consulted on density, employment, the environment, and we took the preferred options and overlaid them onto this diagram, as you can see. So just as an example, some of the feedback from the community was the preference to have the education in the center of the site, as shown in the blue, as well as looking at the density, which again, lower density on the peripheral, sort of really complementing the existing settlements, and then with higher densities towards the center. So this is the same plan, but with a bit more meat to the bones. This was our framework plan, which has now been superseded. Indeed, Graham Kime, our master plan architect, will take you through the most up-to-date framework plan shortly. But this is the plan we took forward to the design review panel in August. In that design review panel, we requested written feedback, which was based on the 6 design principles advocated by Guildford Borough Council, as you can see here, 1 to 6. And indeed, we have had that written feedback, and that has now been uploaded onto our project website. So just looking at some of the meeting minutes on that feedback, some of the key things that were mentioned was they supported the concept of the series of villages, so that's something we have been reviewing. We are also looking at creating a richer sense of place. So hopefully through the ideas map shortly, you will see how we've interpreted that. And I think most important, the integration with the community, including stakeholders such as RHS Wisley. As I mentioned, please do go to our website, www.wisleyairfield.com. In the documents library, there's lots of information there for your review. Furthermore, as part of our commitment to engagement, we've also set up a community liaison group. The purpose of this group is to discuss aspects of the site in a lot more detail. Indeed, it's formed of parish councils, Guildford Society. There's an array of stakeholders there. We have also circulated a newsletter which has those stakeholders available. So please do contact your representative if there are any feedback that you would like to inform us of. We typically meet every 2 weeks, and we have uploaded the presentations and the meeting minutes of those meetings onto our project website, again, for your review and feedback. Camille, would you like to give a quick overview of the current applications, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure. So as mentioned by Adonis earlier, we have now submitted our stub road and enabling works applications. These have both been registered and validated by the local council, and they are currently being consulted on by all internal and external consultees. We are closely monitoring the applications and any comments that are received on them. We are working with Guildford Borough Council and aim to have the applications decided in the first quarter of 2021. Thanks, Adonis.
Thank you. Right, I'll now hand you over to Graham Kime, who will take you through the latest version of the framework plan or the master plan. Graham.
Thank you, Adonis. Good evening, my name is Graham Kime. I'm a director at Gardner Stewart Architects, and we're working with Taylor Wimpey as the master planners for this new settlement. So at the last consultation event in July, we discussed a number of strategic ideas relating to the new neighbourhood, including how we might break it down into 3 different villages. And we discussed the types of facilities that we would be providing on the site and asked you where you thought the best locations for those facilities would be. As Adonis said, there was a high degree of agreement in the feedback, and this diagram shows the preferred locations together on one drawing. We're also showing some walk distance here that feel quite comfortable in terms of our aim to encourage walking and cycling on the site. So thank you very much for your thoughts on that. And this starts to give some shape to our new community. But of course, that's not the design. A master plan is more than a response to a series of constraints and functions. It also has to create a place where people want to live and that can enrich their lives. So we are focusing on placemaking, on creating communities, and on building connections. And those are physical connections, but also social and community connections and visual connections. And our concept proposes a series of green lanes and village greens, which are connected by a sustainable transport corridor. The new settlement will comprise the 3 villages set in an extensive country park that are separated by wide swathes of green space, about 80 to 100 metres across. The village greens then create a sense of arrival to each village and a focus for community life. Each green is located where connections come together to form a natural focus, where one of the green lanes, which are the primary north-south pedestrian and cycle routes, meets the sustainable transport corridor that connects those 3 villages together. At a more detailed level, the master plan is a series of localised design responses. So it's ideas that relate to a particular part of the site or integrate a particular function. So we pose questions and we identify design responses. So for example, how should we respond to Stratford Brook and the wonderful woodland that forms part of the site? Or how can we encourage people to walk or cycle to the shops? And this drawing is a cartoon of all of those ideas combined, so that they interrelate and work together to reinforce the overall concept. So we'll now go on a journey through the site together. Let's assume we're arriving at the Ockham interchange by car or by bus or by cycle. So this is the westernmost village closest to the A3. And number 1 here is the proposed Wisley Lane diversion that, subject to final approval, is being built by Highways England as part of the A3 improvements. And that road will come off the Ockham interchange roundabout, it will pass through our site and will go over the A3 to provide a new access into RHS Wisley. And as we come along Wisley Lane, we can glance across the open space through the new woodland planting and the rolling topography that we're putting in towards our development. And number 2 here shows the arrival. We propose to access our new settlement from this road. At this point, there's a row of mature trees, which was part of an historic hedgerow which crossed the site before the airfield was built. And our idea is to follow the line of the hedgerow and create an arrival sequence. Firstly, we have the ponds and the mature trees that signal the turning off the Wisley diversion. And then a pair of sentinel buildings form a gateway as you reach the arrival space. The former gateway. As you reach the arrival space, the village green, first village green, you crown the hill and you're greeted with this view across the Surrey Hills. And this view provides a connection with the wider context. It's part of the experience of the site that we need to retain. So we will open up this view at a number of locations. You may be wondering why we have some multicoloured trees here. Well, this road is also an entrance to RHS Wisley, so is there an opportunity there to celebrate that? In collaboration with RHS Wisley, perhaps we can create a sense of arrival for them through the planting of specimen trees like a linear arboretum. And that connection to Wisley, of course, is not just by road. We can also recognise that journey by foot or cycle as a horticultural trail. Again, specimen trees, but also foraging routes, allotments, feature planting, community growing areas. The sports pitches, number 5, are on the former hangar site, which is very flat, but it's also sheltered by a tree belt and a change in level. And we'll be providing a very high quality sports facility there with a range of sports, together with a sports pavilion that will provide changing as well as social and community functions. And then the Gypsies and Travellers site is also in this sheltered area. We're providing 8 Gypsy and Traveller pitches as part of the site requirements. Number 6 shows sustainable drainage, and this is something we'll discuss later in the presentation, but water is a wonderful resource. It can provide a whole range of benefits, and by providing sustainable drainage through a series of ponds and lakes and swales, we can create a fantastic amenity for residents, as well as an important ecological habitat. I mentioned the Stratford Brook, which runs through a beautiful area of wet woodland, and that will become part of our accessible open space. We're proposing to introduce a pedestrian path on a raised boardwalk, which will keep your feet dry even when the conditions are a bit damp. And then we continue our journey back. We join the central corridor, which is designed to promote the use of sustainable modes of transport. And again, we'll come to this a little later. So this summarises some of those ideas: the woodland walk with a raised boardwalk, the framed view of the Surrey Hills as we arrive into Village 1, and the horticultural trail on the route to Wisley. So we'll move on to the central village. This is the largest of the three villages, and it's separated from Village 1 by this green strategic corridor, which is about 100 metres across. So it's a wide swathe of green space that creates real separation. And this is another one of those locations where you get these incredible views across the tops of the trees looking out towards the Surrey Hills. Numbers 2 and 3 show the village greens and the green lanes that we described earlier. And this village has 3 village greens, including a larger village park, which is part of the neighbourhood centre. And the village park is located where 5 different public rights of way all converge. So it's a natural focal point. And perhaps there's an opportunity for some public art here to celebrate that. For those of you who know the site, you might recognise this row of poplar trees at the top of Bridgend Farm, an existing landscape feature which do help to frame a really lovely view down towards the Stratford Brook. Number 4 we're showing is the neighbourhood centre, and this of course would be the heart of the whole community. And this contains a wide range of uses, including shops and cafes, employment uses and community buildings. And these would be arranged around a series of landscape spaces. And also promoting the idea of multi-generational spaces, we've located the senior living parts in the neighbourhood centre, close to the primary school, and here there's the most opportunity for people to engage with village life. Number 5 is the all-through school, which would provide nursery, primary and secondary education on a single site. The primary school is part of the community focus at the northern part of the neighbourhood centre, and the secondary school is a focus for one of the village greens. And along this edge is a dedicated pedestrian cycle route south of the school. And this is car-free and therefore minimises conflict between vehicles and children and provides a convenient and safe route to school. And we're in dialogue with the local education authority, and we're discussing their emerging needs. So we'd be happy to answer any questions about where we've got with these discussions at the end. Hatch Lane, coming up from Ockham Lane, is retained as a rural lane with the glimpsed views through to the pastoral landscape over to the left. And that is retained as part of the sustainable green space that we're providing. There will be low density and low rise housing looking onto this space. And at the top of the hill is another opportunity to connect with that long view across the hills and across this Arcadian landscape. And this might be a raised viewing platform next to the pond that we have there, or even a belvedere to allow people to stop and just enjoy that view. So again, 3 of these ideas: sustainable transport corridor, the neighbourhood centre with a view of some people enjoying some alfresco dining, and they're looking down towards Bridgend Farm, where we have some houses and apartments overlooking the central village park. So now on to Village 3 in the east of the site. Again, there's a strategic green corridor that separates villages 2 and 3, which is at least 80 metres wide and provides this landscape separation. And this is aligned with those stunning views across the Surrey Hills. And a viewing mound in the north of this area could take full advantage of those views and also provides views looking west along the full length of the Sound. And this idea of ground modelling continues into the Greenway, where there could be a play mound that integrates natural play features into the landscape. Along the southern and eastern edges, we want to preserve the rural character of both Ockham Lane and Old Lane. So we're proposing a setback of about 20 metres of green space. And the houses along this edge, again, will be low density and low rise, with opportunities to break up that edge, the edge of the development there with landscape. So again, some images of those ideas, taking advantage of the views, using the topography. This is the fruit mound at Wisley, which has an access towards the glass house. the green edge and low density housing along Ockham Lane, and of course within the green space a variety of circular walks. So following the various rounds of engagement and consultation so far, the framework has developed and evolved to address lots of different considerations and to incorporate the new ideas and opportunities. And this is the current framework that we're now working on. This is a strategic plan. It doesn't show individual houses, but it does show the housing areas, the other land uses, and the public open space. So the different shades of yellow and orange represent different densities of housing, and we'll discuss this again later in the presentation. And you can see that the village areas are focused around a series of village greens. As part of our design process, we've studied many of the surrounding villages to understand their forms, their architecture, and the spaces. There are lots of different village greens in Surrey. Some come in a variety of shapes and sizes. They support different functions. They're surrounded by different uses. Some are open to the countryside, like we're showing here, and some are enclosed by buildings and landscape. And many villages, of course, don't have a village green. But we felt that the village green idea would help our new settlement to develop its own identity, generate a sense of community and a sense of place. Greens offer a point of orientation and an opportunity to pause. So this is a sketch image, as I say, of the first village green that greets you when you arrive from the west, with that view across the Surrey Hills that we can frame using the buildings and the landscape. And that makes this green unique. But each of the village greens will have a unique character and contain different functions and have a different community focus, such as a local shop that we're proposing in Village 1, but it may be a children's play space or a village pond where people can come together and engage in village life. Now, as Camille said at the beginning, we're submitting an outline planning application. So we're not designing the buildings in detail at this stage. And so the homes we're showing here are illustrative. We will be designing the homes and streets that take their cues from the architectural forms, features and materials in the local area. But this new settlement needs to create its own sense of identity, so we don't necessarily have to replicate those buildings, but we'd like to hear what your views are on the architectural approach we should take here to make this place distinctive. So back to the village greens. What makes a village green? Well, there's lots of things potentially. It's a landscape space, so it contains opportunities for wildlife and biodiversity. But it's also a social space where people can exercise and play and meet and potentially play sport. There are often a few shops or a cafe, a pub or a church, and potential for community and social events like a village fete or a farmer's market. And these are some examples of local village greens and some of their features. So for example, there's a wonderful water pump at Brockham, the signage that welcomes you into Walkerston, the village pond at Chiddingfold. Most greens are primarily grass, and they're characterised by their shape or their size or their aspects and the uses around them. So what about the size and scales of our spaces? These are some comparison slides that show some of our green spaces overlaid on some local greens that you might know. So this is an outline of our Village 1 green overlaid on the village greens at Shamley Green and Brockham. And you can see that the spaces are comparable. The size of our village park, which is larger, is comparable to Chiddingfold Green. And a market square is comparable in width to those linear spaces in the centre of Cranley. Similarly, this green in Walkerston is similar to the size of the green in Village 3. And the linear space that extends from the green, with its houses set back and its wide green verges protecting the pedestrian cycle route from the edge of the road, is similar to the approach that we're taking to segregate pedestrian cycle routes on the approach to our schools. So I'll bring you back to this question. What do we think should be included in a contemporary village green? Is it the same as those examples I've just shown you, or is there something different? So we've put some ideas here, such as children's play, public art and local information boards, but it would be much appreciated if you can suggest your ideas in the feedback forms as to what you might want to see in a village green. So what sort of homes will we be providing? Well, across the site, we're master planning for 2,000 homes overall, of which just under 1,800 will be on the Taylor Wimpey part of the site. Plus there will be 100 specialist senior living apartments. we'll be providing a range of housing that meets the local need as set out in Guildford Borough Council's housing policy, which you can see from the pie chart is mainly 2 and 3 bedroomed homes. 40% of the homes will be affordable tenures, and it's great to have John here from Vivid who'll be able to answer any questions that you have on those. Now, we are required to make efficient use of land, and the allocation and the SPD suggest that we should be building at an average of around 45 dwellings per hectare. So the density of homes will not be the same as the surrounding settlements. This place will have its own character and generally higher densities. We discussed density at the first consultation, and we showed you this diagram in the bottom corner, which we call the pebble in the pond. And essentially this shows how the density of the proposals decrease towards the edges of the new development. And this allows us to create a range of different densities and different character areas that respond to specific parts of the site. The main diagram shows how this has been developed, and you can see that the principles have remained the same. The lowest densities in the yellow are the more sensitive areas, and these will be mainly detached and semi-detached houses with densities as low as 15 and up to 35 dwellings per hectare. The medium density in the pale orange is then spread out along the central spine road, and this would have more continuous frontages and more small apartment buildings. The higher density areas and the neighbourhood centre will have more apartments again, and in that area we might expect more than 50% of the homes to be apartments. Similarly, this slide shows the potential heights of the buildings across the site, which follows a similar pattern to the density strategy. The lowest building heights are where we have the lowest densities, and the heights generally increase along the central corridor and towards the neighbourhood centre. But nevertheless, in general, the majority of the buildings will be between 2 and 3 stories throughout. There'll be some 4-storey buildings in the central spine and in the village centre, and in sensitive areas we can limit those heights to a maximum of 2 stories. On the second diagram, we've overlaid the massing zones onto the topography plans, which shows that the taller zone in the centre of the site is not the highest part of the site, which is shown here in the red. We're currently looking at 3-dimensional studies to refine this strategy and help us specifically locate any of those 4-storey buildings and test how the roofscape will appear from the surrounding area. So what do these different densities look like? This sketch shows a low density edge from part of the northern Sang looking towards 2 and 2.5 storey detached and semi-detached homes. And you can see that the edges are quite organic, and we introduce landscape in front of the buildings and between the buildings to break down the edge of the development. And these are some examples of how low density homes have been designed in other places. So it would be interesting to hear your views on the feedback forms regarding the style of architecture that you feel we should be designing here. So this is a view taken along the sustainable transport corridor in Village 1. You can see that it's still generally 2 and 3 stories, but the buildings are more continuous, and there are small apartment buildings at the junctions and key locations. This sketch shows the character that we're trying to create along here. So it's a very green street with segregated routes for cyclists and pedestrians. So it's about making a place where people feel comfortable walking and cycling, with street trees, green boundaries, and wide verges with sustainable drainage features. Again, this architecture is illustrative, and the local building forms and materials we're showing here could equally be applied in a more contemporary way. So these are some precedent examples of homes along a transport corridor with green spaces and wide verges and more continuous frontages. And the two on the right offer a more vernacular, traditional approach to the architecture. The two views on the left are a more contemporary approach. Away from the central corridor, the other medium density areas will be designed as narrow streets and lanes. They'll be tighter and more pedestrian friendly, with slower traffic speeds and a variety of architectural forms and locally relevant materials such as brick and tile hanging. So on this slide again, a variety of ways that other developments have achieved those types of characters. Some of these streets are softer and greener in character, and some have a more intimate feel, but with harder landscape treatment. So do you have a view on these approaches? And here is a possible view of the neighbourhood centre. And here and in the surrounding area, the residential densities become more intense. They are consistently 3 and sometimes 4 stories. Here we're showing apartments above shops. In the distance, you can see some 3-story terraced housing and some 4-story apartments, which are overlooking the village park. And again, these images show a number of ways to treat high density development, using apartment buildings, terraced homes, and homes over shops. And we think that this part of the site is likely to become more contemporary in its style, whilst still being sensitive to the local area and the local forms. But we'd be interested to hear your views on this. Now, the Sustainable Transport Corridor, which you've heard me talk about, runs through the site and ties together all of these different areas and connects the different facilities. Whilst along that route its character will change as it passes through different parts of the development, it remains this constant element that helps to provide orientation. And its purpose is to connect places, to encourage people to use more sustainable forms of transport by making it as easy as possible to get from one part of the site to another by foot or cycle via this attractive and safe route. So what would it look like? This plan shows the character of the central spine as a wide green corridor with segregated routes for cars, for pedestrians and for cyclists in order to reduce any conflict. Road junctions and crossovers onto driveways are minimised along this route, and where they do occur, the cyclists will have priority over the cars. So it will be an attractive, safe and very legible route that connects all parts of the new settlement, so helping to make that shift to walking and cycling that bit easier. And it's not just about movement, it's about turning a road corridor into something more communal and celebrating it. It's about creating a green outlook for more people, introducing pocket parks and village greens as a point of orientation, somewhere to stop and chat, for the kids to play on the way home from school. And it's also this sustainable drainage corridor. So it's something more than a road, it's a piece of green infrastructure, and it's a positive piece of placemaking. And all of the green spaces are hugely important to the master plan, both in the way that they create an attractive and pleasant environment, but also the way that they contribute towards a green and healthy neighbourhood, providing opportunities for people to be active and to socialise, which I think we can all recognise has become increasingly important. So this plan outlines some of those uses and how they might be used. The SANG, which is a suitable alternative natural green space, which we're providing in the all around the development in the north and the south. And this provides opportunities for circular walks and trim trails and cycle routes. The greenways between the villages have a variety of uses, but include formal children's play areas. The village greens with their community focus, such as the local shops. The sports facilities, from formal sports pitches to more informal opportunities to ride a bike or kick a ball, allotments and communal growing spaces. And then in the neighbourhood centre, more formal spaces such as a market square, a school square where people can wait together for their children. And then we mustn't forget the benefit of green views from both within and beyond the site. So looking at the neighbourhood centre, this provides a focus for the whole community. It will include shops, including a food store, cafes, community buildings such as a village hall and a health facility, and employment uses. It will also engage with the schools and with homes. So it's a genuine mix of uses. The neighbourhood centre, as I say, is arranged along the line of Hatch Lane. Hatch Lane is retained in the south as this lovely rural lane, but opens up to reveal the village park, where these 5 pedestrian routes converge. And within the park, there will be a variety of uses like a children's play space or terraced seating for an informal lunch break. And of course, the opportunity for public events that might be organised through the community trust. And we've carried out surveys of facilities in some of the surrounding villages in order to understand what is already provided and the types of services that we may need to provide in our neighbourhood centre. And this drawing shows how we might organise the buildings and spaces. We are in discussion with a number of potential users and operators, so things may change as we start to pull all those different ideas together. But essentially, there will be a number of different building uses that are arranged around a progression of landscape spaces. And these spaces will offer a variety of characters and places that relate to the buildings around them. So, for example, the shops face onto the market square, perhaps an opportunity for a monthly farmers market. A small piazza by the cafe for outdoor eating or having a cup of coffee in the morning. A landscape garden by the community centre, and a school square where parents can gather to chat at home time. In terms of the building uses, you see we're providing a food store with maybe 5 to 8 smaller shops or cafe units, all with apartments above them. We've mentioned the village hall, hopefully run by the community trust, and we're talking to healthcare providers about the healthcare facility. There will also be significant employment uses. We are looking seriously at how office space requirements may have changed and towards the post-COVID world. So potentially approaches that provide support to people who work from home or close to home by providing flexible office space and co-working space. Somewhere where you could hire just a desk or a meeting room where you can get business advice or providing a photocopying service, that type of thing. And I think it's generally recognised that there will be more home working in the future, and this type of facility is an appropriate way forward that I think will add vitality to the neighbour centre and be a real community resource. In the green, next to the employment use there, is the sustainable transport hub. And this will be where you could lease your e-bike or your e-scooter. There will be rapid charging points available for electric cars and potentially an overhead charging point for an electric bus. So again, we've put together a couple of images of recent neighbourhood centres that show different types of character, and we would appreciate your views in the feedback form of what you would like to see. So I'll finish the presentation again with the view of our neighbourhood centre, a cafe with outdoor seating, the community centre on the left, and ahead the sustainable transport hub with its e-bikes and charging facilities, showing a potential for an electric bus. And there's a row of apartments in front of us, a row of shops in front of us with apartments above. So thank you very much. I'll now hand over to Colin Mackay, who will discuss highways.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Colin Mackay, and for those who did not attend the previous consultation, I'm the Technical Director leading the work WSP are doing on the transport aspects of the Wisley Airfield proposed development. And apologies for the quality of the visual of my face. I look a bit like Father Christmas in a snowstorm, so apologies for the technical glitch there. We have listened to the views of people who responded to the previous consultation in July. We took away a number of points, including the ones shown here. We know there is a general concern about traffic and achieving connections beyond the site boundary. However, there were also a number of encouraging points that we took away. For example, the majority of respondents agreed with giving sustainable transport priority. A quarter of respondents answered they might agree with them, indicating that more clarity is required. There was also a lot of support for e-bikes and for good bus services. So we have listened, and we want to show you how we have progressed since then. Firstly, an update on general progress being made on the transport assessment. We're developing the traffic model that will be used to predict the traffic flows and any off-site mitigation required. The next stage will be to have the model checked by Surrey County Council and Highways England to ensure it is fit for purpose. And once that has been done, we can assemble the future year flows and carry out the transport assessment, as well as inform the air quality and noise assessments required for the environmental statement. And this is set to take place early next year. Part of the transport assessment will be assessing the mitigation options for Ripley and the surrounding area. We need to follow a process set out by Highways England for mitigation options involving impacts on the A3 trunk road. This will involve looking at mitigation options, including the identified burnt common slips, to ensure they're robust and deliverable. So looking at our next steps on transport, that engagement will be taking place this year. And again, we are conscious of the concerns about traffic raised during previous consultation in July. and we expect to have feedback on this aspect during the early part of next year once the modelling is complete. We'll also be carrying out ongoing engagement with stakeholders right up to submission of the planning application next year. However, in the meantime, we want to set out how we are seeking to reduce traffic levels through the adoption and promotion of sustainable transport measures. Sustainable transport, as you probably all know, is a mainstay of national and local planning policy. The adopted Guildford Borough Council local plan, policy A35, summarised here, sets out what we are expected to address as part of the proposed development. It talks about access points, mitigation measures, and bus and cycle networks required for connectivity. These ideas have been further developed by Guildford Borough Council in the Council's supplementary planning document in terms of, firstly, the vehicular connections to the various external destinations shown on this slide here, which you can see also includes ideas on bus links to other communities. And on this slide, what it terms active travel links on foot and bicycle. These are all options we are actively exploring within the constraints we already know about from our detailed work to date. And Guildford Borough Council also set out 6 groups of sustainability principles, shown in the headlines here, to assist in delivering each of the strategic development sites, so not just Risley Airfield. We are following these principles closely in the design of the master plan and in our transport strategy generally. As already stated, Taylor Wimpey are making this development an exemplar site for sustainability, and clearly transport is a major aspect of that agenda. Most importantly, we want to influence travel decisions at the front door before the journey takes place. We're all familiar with the business as usual mindset, such as the thoughts shown here. That mindset is driven by the availability or the lack of opportunities to do things differently. Our behaviour change expert Martin will touch on this later, but if the opportunities are made available, then people are more likely to change, given the right encouragement. By making these opportunities available, we aim to change the mindset to one that sees and makes use of them. Through thoughtful and intelligent design of the proposed development, people living on it will see that the opportunities are all around them, and through publicity and promotion, the benefits will be pointed out to them. Simple things like where we store our cycles makes these decisions less agonised. Buses that run frequently and are easy to get to save time in searching for parking at destinations like town centres and railway stations. If they use sustainable energy, that also introduces the feel-good factor. Some decisions will also reflect the changes in lifestyle that some people may experience post-COVID, where they can work from home more frequently. We will be ensuring that adequate broadband connections are provided across the site. So let's look at buses now in more detail. Looking at the layout of the site, shown here in the bottom right-hand corner, the site lends itself to bus services very well and means that a direct route through the site puts most houses within 200 metres of a bus stop and all of them within 400 metres, the recommended walking distance to a bus stop. The bus stops themselves will provide shelter and could also integrate green roofs or solar panels to maximise their sustainable contribution. Electric buses are becoming more accepted into operators' fleets and offer cheaper running costs. And some of you will know that these are already being used in Guildford. We will future-proof this site with charging infrastructure to make electric buses a practical option. Now, we also want to build on and bolster existing services. Some existing services would be enhanced to improve the frequency within existing communities, improving the offer beyond the site, as well as serving the site itself. You can see from the sketches here, showing that some infrequent existing services, shown in dashed orange lines on the left, will be enhanced to more frequent services, as shown on the right. The priority is to serve local railway stations, though, recognising the high proportion of rail travellers from this part of Surrey and the limited capacity of the car parks. So we'll be providing a high frequency service to match the train departure and arrival times as closely as practically possible. Woking may also be served with its higher frequency service to London and Hampshire and its retail and employment opportunities. Although we do recognise that train services have tended to be much busier and crowded than the services via Effingham station. Responding to feedback from the first public consultation events, a service to Cobham will be provided if we possibly can, using one of the fleet of buses, probably not as frequent as the other services, but this will allow, for example, shopping or personal business trips to this popular destination. The number of buses in the fleet will be increased to meet demand as the proposed development progresses. It's very important to have a bus service in the early years, although it will probably comprise smaller vehicles and a slightly more limited number of destinations will be served. However, a 7-day service will still be offered during the early period of the development. In later years, a fleet comprising a mix of vehicle sizes will go to all the identified destinations, and a longer daily service on the key routes will be provided to serve leisure trips and late workers arriving home on the train. Bus services will be funded through the fares passengers pay, but in the early years, pump priming support will be available from Taylor Wimpey. A predicted modal share for the bus service will be projected and validated using a range of other experience throughout the UK on similar developments. However, this will be calibrated to more local experience. The Guildford urban area is an important reference, having modal shares of up to 14% in some locations and typically up to 8%. On this basis, we believe the bus services we will be proposing can be supported without substantial ongoing subsidy. I'll now talk a bit about cycling before handing over to Martin, starting with policy initiatives. As we're all probably aware, changes are being driven by international, national and local policy on transport. The Paris Accord, UK government policy initiatives and even prime ministers are raising the profile of cycling. It is essential to maximise the uptake of walking and cycling. Much has been done recently in the UK to promote travel by bike over motorised traffic. 20 mph speed limits in town centres are now commonplace. The Highway Code Consultation proposes changes that will offer better protection to vulnerable road users, so that's pedestrians, cyclists and equestrians, and place greater responsibility on car drivers to look after them. Cycle infrastructure now has to comply with guidance aimed at segregating cyclists from drivers and pedestrians and giving them priority over motor vehicles at junctions and road crossings. As Graham has described already, the master plan is being designed with this new guidance at the forefront. So I'll now hand over to Martin Higgett to discuss the particular ways we plan bringing forward cycling initiatives on the site and about the role of behaviour change in achieving our sustainability objectives. Thank you.
Thanks, Colin, and good evening, everyone. I'm Martin Higgett, and I specialise in sustainable transport and travel behaviour change, and I'm contributing on measures to encourage cycling, including the provision of cycling measures within the development and connections to external destinations, as well as travel plan and promotional measures. We're focusing a lot of effort on cycling because we think it shows real potential for trips within the development and to local destinations. It's a low impact form of transport. It provides great health benefits to people, and there's growing national commitment, as Colin said, to supporting cycling. Further, research also shows there is a large latent demand for cycling. Where there's been sustained investment, cycling levels have grown. So in London, over the last couple of decades, cycling levels have grown by 144% in relation to that investment. Sustrans regularly undertake surveys of school-aged children showing that children are really keen to cycle, but it's often concerned parents that are stopping them. And as this graph here shows, during lockdown, cycle levels across England ballooned and many people bought bikes and took up cycling whilst traffic levels were down. But the main reasons people don't cycle is really fear of traffic and lack of safe cycling infrastructure, as well as the availability of a bike, all issues which we would hope to address. A quick word about e-bikes, as they have the potential to substantially increase participation in cycling and are an important part of our strategy for the former Wisley Airfield. E-bikes provide assistance when pedalling up to a speed of 15.5 miles an hour, at which point the motor cuts off. Research and initial pilots have shown they're good for widening the market for cycling, particularly attracting women, older people, and people with some form of physical restriction that makes cycling a pedal bike difficult. E-bikes enable people to take up longer journeys. The average e-bike journey is 50 to 60% longer than a pedal bike journey, and e-bike users tend to increase the number of trips they take by bike. They've also been shown to be particularly effective at replacing journeys previously made by car. Nearly 2/3 of journeys in the UK are below 5 miles in distance, and these are distances easily accomplished by an e-bike. In Cambridgeshire, which is our best cycling place probably in England, they're building greenways to the ring of villages within 10 miles of Cambridge in recognition and anticipation that journeys into Cambridge will be attractive to cycling and e-bikes. We're looking at providing high quality cycling infrastructure, both within the development itself, as well as links to important local destinations. The rationale behind these measures is that they should be acceptable to the average cyclist. The recent government cycle infrastructure guidance provides clear guidance on what sort of infrastructure needs to be provided on roads with different levels of traffic and speeds. So in the development itself, as Graham mentioned, we'll be providing high quality segregated cycling facilities along the main spine road and connecting to these key routes towards external destinations. Just to give you an illustration of the types of infrastructure being examined, the first column shows types of solution for busier traffic routes. The ideal is for fully segregated routes, keeping cars and bikes apart. Of course, in that first image, which is from the Netherlands, we lack that sort of space in most of Surrey. But generally on busier routes, we want to provide some level of segregation. On rural routes, where there's insufficient space in the carriageways, some options include going behind the hedge, or on lightly traffic routes, removing the centre line and demarcating cycle lanes. And on residential streets, a 20-mile-an-hour limit allows cyclists to safely mix with general traffic. Traffic-free routes can also play their part, particularly for more leisure journeys. They need to have decent width where they're shared with pedestrians, have smooth surfaces, and be well maintained. If I could go next, thank you. When we are in conservation areas or other sensitive environments, we want to make sure that cycling provision respects that location. So in the left column, there's a couple of illustrations of road treatments that respect the local environment and slow traffic so that, again, cyclists can safely mix with general traffic. Clear signing of routes is important. Lighting, particularly of off-road routes, needs careful consideration. There's an issue of whether to light or not, depending on circumstances. But where decisions are taken to provide lighting, there are solutions that can minimise upward light pollution. Finally, secure, convenient cycle parking at final destinations is crucial, and there are plenty of good examples of high quality cycle parking at rail stations, for example. So the policy challenge is to provide cycle links suitable for the average cyclist to 4 key local destinations: East Horsley, Effingham Junction, Ripley and Byfleet. And we're currently developing our proposals for these links. All of these destinations are within easy cycling distance. The bike journeys can be completed in 10 to 20 minutes, and they don't tend to take much longer than driving. In some cases, such as Byfleet, cycling will be a lot quicker than driving because we can go in a much more direct route. We're currently looking at different route options to these destinations and considering appropriate types of cycling infrastructure as highlighted in the previous slides. I've produced a map there, and in red lines we've labelled our preferred routes to the 4 key destinations. In green solid lines are Surrey County Council existing routes, and in green dotted lines our Surrey County Council aspirations for future cycle provision. So we're also considering how the connections we deliver can link into existing routes and future networks. So we hope that this shows how our proposals will link strongly with existing and planned infrastructure to substantially increase the network of safe cycle routes in the wider area, making it possible to reach a range of destinations, not just for residents of our new community, but enabling many from surrounding communities to confidently and safely make cycle journeys. And questions that we'd particularly welcome feedback include, are there any other cycle routes to key destinations that we should be thinking of? And just a word on promotional measures. We would undertake a lot of promotional activity through the travel plan to maximise the uptake of the sustainable transport services and facilities we plan to provide. There would be travel plans developed for different elements of the development, including the residential, the employer and the schools. Possible promotional measures that we're currently working on include the following. So developing a high quality website and travel app to provide up-to-date information to residents and site users on their travel options and providing easy access to some of the services we'll offer. Welcome packs provided to residents showing the facilities available on site and in neighbouring settlements and the travel options available to them. Sales staff would be trained to advocate sustainable transport options when people are contemplating moving here. And as much as we can, we want to start influencing the way people think about their travel options before they move in. There would be a programme of ongoing support for sustainable travel, including social walks and social rides, bike tryouts, cycle training, doctor bike, maintenance classes, as well as car club demos. We're developing ideas for a bike and e-bike loan scheme where residents or employees are offered a bike or e-bike for a month's tryout and then can extend the loan or buy. We're also looking at the potential for a subscription service where a resident may pay a monthly fee and receive free car club membership, discounted bike loan and discounted bus fares. This way we can hopefully make all sustainable transport options readily available and increase people's loyalty towards them. Promotional activities can be highly effective, especially if they are offered alongside good infrastructure and services. For new developments, the key is to influence people early when they've arrived and to embed those habits from day one and avoid people becoming reliant on the car. So again, questions we'd welcome feedback on. What ideas do you have that could persuade our residents to use sustainable transport modes? And how else could our proposals benefit or help the local community to travel by more sustainable means? And that's it from me for now. And I'll hand you over to Rob, who's going to talk a bit more about sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Good evening all. My name is Rob Miller. I'm an associate at Greengage Environmental, a dedicated sustainability consultancy, and we're supporting Taylor Wimpey to develop the overarching sustainability strategy for proposed development. And the intention of the sustainability process here is to coordinate a holistic approach to deliver sustainability best practice across the development. Taylor Wimpey are pushing the whole design team to ensure that sustainable performance is maximised throughout the design. We've already heard about lots of great design ambitions as part of the developing master plan, and we'll hear about many more which could assist in creating a really sustainable development. Process detailed below aims to document those interventions in a structured and robust framework. The process was initially presented to and agreed with Guildford Borough Council and aims to communicate the sustainable journey for the master plan development from the initial sustainability vision through development of the strategy, which we're doing now, and then monitoring this within the framework to robustly document performance across all of the subjects. So further to the development of the sustainability approach, we've produced the following 7 vision principles, which have been presented in the first instance to both Guildford Borough Council and as part of the first design review panel meeting. And initial feedback from these discussions was for the development of outcome-based targets, which are being produced as part of the developing strategy now. The intention is that these topics cover the full scope of sustainability issues and have been developed to align with and respond to relevant policy and guidance. This includes both the recent climate change SPD and also the Making Sustainable Places in Guildford principles that was already mentioned by Colin. So as a baseline, we'll be targeting policy compliance. However, the ambition is really to aim for best practice and innovation wherever possible, and for the development to represent exemplar sustainable performance. So in terms of our current activity, we're working with the design team to develop the initial sustainability strategy and exploring the targets and specific interventions that are achievable within each of these principles. So this has involved workshops on each of the key topics to explore those opportunities to maximise performance. And this initial version of the strategy is close to completion in draft. And the intention is for this to be circulated for comment, and we want this to be very much a joined up approach with all of the community stakeholders. The key overall outcome of the strategy is to ensure that all of the elements of sustainable design work together in a single cohesive approach that positively impacts on the natural environment, maximises social value, and offers economic benefit to the development locally and also to the wider community. The image below just illustrates some of the key connections between technical disciplines that contribute to creating a sustainable community, such as between the transport strategy, as we just heard about, and health and well-being, the green infrastructure approach and climate resilience, as Graham mentioned, and biodiversity and education, for example. And the sustainability strategy aims to capture all of these interactions. One of the key themes that forms a critical part of the sustainability story is that of the energy strategy. So in its simplest form, Taylor Wimpey want to make the proposed homes as energy efficient as possible. So reducing reliance on fossil fuels and reducing the overall carbon footprint of the development. And to this end, the energy strategy would be aligned with current industry recognised pathway to net zero carbon emissions. The first stage of this strategy is to reduce energy demand by using super energy efficient materials and building fabric. The likely preferred option for energy delivery will be an electric based system. And this aligns with the phasing out of gas infrastructure in new homes by 2025. And then finally, renewable technology will be integrated into the scheme, which might be in the form of solar PV, shown in one of the images, a couple of the images, as well as other smart technologies like battery storage, for example, that help manage energy consumption across a development. And finally, we're also considering the embodied carbon of the development. So this is the energy associated with extracting, manufacturing and transporting materials used to build the homes or build the scheme. This impact will be measured and we'll explore a range of options to minimise the embodied carbon for the project as far as possible. So thank you very much. That's all from me really on the sustainability strategy at this stage, and I'll now hand over to Sam to discuss the landscape approach.
Hi, thanks Martin. Hi, my name's Sam Hart and I'm a director at Davies Landscape Architects. We've been working closely with the architects and ecologists to create an attractive and multifunctional landscape which will protect, restore and enhance the existing sensitive features whilst providing opportunities for new landscape experiences, users and habitats. These are grouped together with the banner of Green Infrastructure or GI. We have set out the following slides to show how this has been progressing and how comments made in the various consultations have been incorporated into the developing landscape. The last year has really emphasised the importance of easy access to open space and contact with nature for our mental and physical well-being. We aim to create a series of different landscapes and experiences which will be interconnected and provide multifunctional green spaces which will be accessible by all ages and abilities. The landscapes will form an important element in the character and setting of each village, as well as bringing GI and biodiversity into the heart of each development. The GI will also afford opportunities to improve air quality, reduce noise from the A3 and alleviate drainage issues, and will play an integral part in the sustainability of the development. It will also form an adaptable, robust landscape framework which will be resilient against the effects of climate change and will endure into the next century. As part of this process, it's our aspiration to work closely with RHS Wisley to benefit from the innovation and research into plant selection and management. The scale of the landscape provides opportunities for us to bring the elements of the gardens into the site through features such as small formal gardens in the village centres, parkland tree species, and as mentioned by Graham, a potential arboretum. Next slide, thank you. As illustrated on the historic map shown on this slide, the majority of the landscape framework was lost when the former agricultural landscape was changed to an airfield. There are some remnants of the former hedgerows and field patterns visible around the perimeters and along the Stratford Brook corridor. The airfield provides a unique opportunity to create a new and attractive and distinctive setting to the new villages. As an overriding strategy, we've begun to take inspiration from the rich history of parkland and commons that can be found in the surrounding countryside. These will be redesigned to reflect 21st century lifestyles and become a model of sustainable and high quality landscape design. As part of the developing vision, we've come up with a series of objectives that are driving the design choices. As shown on the previous map, there are a number of opportunities to restore landscape character features such as woodland and hedgerows. Existing features will be protected and enhanced to improve their quality and longevity and will be reconnected to the wider landscape. The reinforcement of the boundaries and connectivity of the landscape within the site will reinstate the smaller scale patterns evident in the wider countryside and provide a more intimate setting for the development. The proposals will provide a significant increase in the quality and quantum of key features such as hedgerows, trees, and grasslands, which will extend from the wider setting into the villages. Green corridors will divide and provide the setting for the 3 distinct villages and will include opportunities for formal and informal recreation and social interaction. We will look at the potential types and opportunities in the following slides. In order to successfully set the development within the landscape, scale, density and height will be carefully considered. This will be further tested to ensure the proposals can be successfully assimilated to the surrounding and existing landscape framework. This is particularly relevant along the southern boundary and the higher parts of the site to the east. The division of the development into 3 villages by strategic green corridors will break up the roofscape and massing and views, including limited elevated views from the A and B. Tree planting along streets, pocket parks and squares will further break up views of the wider development. Another way of integrating the built form into the landscape will be the use of neutral hues and tones in the building design, avoiding stark contrast with a naturalised setting. The majority of the landscape around the development will provide a local and easily accessible naturalised parkland, which will afford people the opportunity to connect with nature on their doorstep. Within these areas, we can create a wide range of native habitats, including woodland, hedgerows, wildflower meadows, marshy grasslands and shrub mosaics. We will also provide a wide network of interlinking circular walking and cycling routes, including the existing public rights-of-way. These will run through the parkland and open space corridors, providing connection between the 3 villages and routes off-site. Within the site, we'll provide opportunities for a series of short, medium and long circular routes, including a 9.5 kilometre path. Some footpaths and cycleways will be shared surfaces constructed in self-binding aggregates for all round use, but others will be less formal. Along these routes, we will introduce features such as seating areas, art installations and trim trails to provide additional points of interest to draw people into the landscape. We would be interested to hear any further suggestions that we could incorporate. The development will provide a wide range of opportunities to enjoy the landscape, and we've summarised these on the following slides. So policy P5 sets out an approach to the protection of the Thames Basin heaths through alternative provision. This is in the form of suitable alternative natural green space, or SAM. The provision of 50 hectares of SAM complies with this requirement and provides the majority of the landscape to the north and south of development. Local Plan Saved Policy R2 requires us to provide a minimum of 14 hectares of different open space types, as shown on the pie chart and summarised on the following slides. In addition, we're aiming to provide facilities where there may be a shortfall in the area, and we'd be interested in any thoughts you may have on this. Next slide. Okay. The existing landscape features provide opportunities for 2 different types of SAM. To the north, the existing arable fields and hard standing will be transformed into a new wildlife haven with lots of features to draw people in. The area will consist of a mix of native woodland, copses, grasslands and wildflower meadows, interspersed with ponds and linear swales to add interest and further opportunities for wildlife. New landforms will be introduced to visually break up the openness between footpath and cycle links and create views and vistas towards points of interest and opportunities for natural play. The routes and views will be supplemented with art and sculpture installations, as well as seating areas and picnic benches. The northern SAM will also include a trim trail or a park run route which will link to the villages. The southern Sang runs along the Stratford Brook, and the wet woodland and steep southern slopes provide an alternative range of habitats and visual experiences. These experiences will focus on the existing mature wooded Stratford Brook corridor and will include the introduction of a broad walk, which will pass through the marshy grassland and bluebell areas and has been brought up in previous consultations. The steeper slopes will be managed for species-rich grassland and be interspersed with drainage features to create interesting focal points and habitat opportunities. The southern boundary around Bridge End Farm provides opportunities for key views of the South Downs, and these will be incorporated into the vistas and routes. Play forms an integral part of children's development and an important element to building a community. The proposal will afford opportunities for a wide range of experiences and environments for young and older children to play. These will be set within the recommended walking distances and along safe routes. The development will also provide for informal and formal space, offering a wide range of opportunities for recreation, socialising and interacting with nature, as well as an attractive setting and identity to each village. We've summarised on this slide a selection of potential activities, but are open to any further suggestions. It's important to harness the mental and physical welfare benefits that growing food can bring, and having the opportunity to produce food on your own doorstep. These will range in sizes from the more traditional allotments to other localised community and education opportunities. We've just outlined a couple of suggestions there, but there's a lot more available opportunities arising. The Sang provides opportunities to incorporate informal food gatherings such as foraging routes. The ongoing consultations have identified local concerns regarding runoff from the airfield. The drainage strategy is being developed to alleviate this situation and will capture all current and future runoff from the site. Flood risk will be managed in a positive way, celebrating water and its value as a precious resource not to be wasted. It will be a highly integrated and holistic system, linking the urban and green infrastructure. It will also provide and enhance biodiversity opportunities and be used to create attractive features such as ponds, swales and rain gardens, and incorporate features such as biofiltration beds, art, play and education opportunities. The water and suds will be used to harvest and integrate public spaces. I'll now pass you on to Rebecca, who will discuss ecology.
Thanks, Sam, and good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Rebecca Brookbank, and I'm the Technical Director at Ecological Planning and Research Limited, an ecological consultancy. My job is to ensure that ecology and wildlife is taken into account in all aspects of the project and is protected as part of the scheme. This includes making sure we have up-to-date survey information regarding the features present on site, carrying out impact assessments and designing mitigation, feeding back ecological requirements to the master planning and design teams, and providing advice and supervision for ongoing site investigations, as well as during implementation. We know that local residents have expressed concern about the existing wildlife on site and how it will be protected. And I want to reassure you that conserving the existing features of ecological importance on site is our priority too. We're working very closely with the design team on this. Some of you may have heard my colleague Jodie talk about existing ecological habitats and species at the site during the last public consultation. So this time I'd like to share our thoughts on how we can integrate biodiversity into the whole development, and in doing so, mitigate ecological impacts, create new habitats and features of ecological value, and ensure overall gains for biodiversity are achieved. We had some really good feedback on this from the previous public consultation, so thank you to those of you who contributed. We're committed to delivering biodiversity net gain, so I'd first like to talk a bit about this concept and then look at how we can achieve this at the former Wisley Airfield. Biodiversity net gain is a concept that's gaining traction through national and local planning policy and is likely to become a legal requirement when the government's environment bill is passed. It essentially means that after development, an area or site is in better shape for biodiversity than it was before. For example, through increases in the overall extent of wildlife habitat, improvements in the distinctiveness, condition and/or connectivity of those habitats, which in turn has benefits for the plant and animal species that they support. Biodiversity net gain is often measured through a biodiversity metric or calculation tool, which estimates a percentage gain or loss. And we're aiming for a minimum 10% net gain using the metric produced by Natural England. So in order to work out whether you can achieve a biodiversity net gain, you first need to understand and quantify your baseline habitats, or what is there already. We have over 10 years worth of survey data for the former Wisley Airfield site, and we're still updating this information regularly. We know that the vast majority of the site is intensive arable, so it's sprayed with all kinds of chemicals and it's not wildlife friendly at all, and hard standing that's of very limited ecological value. We found that most of the biodiversity interest is associated with the areas of scrub, woodland and rough grassland around the boundaries and at the western end of the airfield, which are the areas included in the Site of Nature Conservation Importance. These habitats support protected species such as badgers, great crested newts, reptiles, several species of nesting birds and foraging bats. The next step in calculating biodiversity gain is to quantify the different habitats that will be created by the scheme, and the biodiversity metric takes into account the time different habitats take to reach maturity. At the former Wisley Airfield, we have a huge opportunity to create really extensive areas of wildlife-rich habitats from the concrete and intensive arable land that's currently there. As you saw on the master planning slides earlier, the scheme can deliver over 50 hectares of sang and other green spaces, which will be connected to each other and to the wider landscape. The sang alone will be one of the largest in Surrey. We're also working closely with our sustainability consultants, who you heard from earlier, on ways to build wildlife habitats into the residential areas too, which is something that came through strongly in the feedback from the first consultation. I'll show you some examples of how biodiversity gains can be delivered on the next couple of slides. Firstly, we'd like to use the huge areas of sang and green space to create expansive wildflower-rich meadows, interspersed with scrub and woodland planting, banks and bunds and wetland features. We'll integrate these new habitats with existing habitats, such as the Stratford Brook woodland in the southwest corner of the site, which is pictured on the slide, and the rough grasslands and scrub that already support species of conservation interest, and then to manage these in the long term with wildlife in mind. And when we say manage, we don't mean neat manicured parks. We want these green spaces to be wild and natural. We're talking about things like controlling invasive non-native species, reducing the nutrient levels in the grasslands over time to promote the growth of wildflowers, and maintaining a balance of all the different habitats as a mosaic, allowing some natural succession, but also preventing highly competitive species like bramble, nettles and bracken from completely taking over, which is what is happening now at the western end of the site. The idea is to create the right conditions for existing wildlife populations to be able to expand and move around the landscape, and also to attract new species. The key to this will be creating botanically and structurally diverse habitats, as these support large and diverse populations of insects, which in turn provide food for species of birds, bats, reptiles, amphibians and other mammals. Varied habitats also create the right conditions to support other key life cycle requirements, such as nesting, roosting, breeding, commuting, hibernating, as well as providing places for refuge. We've listened to concerns about the potential for wildlife to be disturbed within the sang, and this is something we're looking at carefully as part of the design process. The advantage of having such a large sang is that there's plenty of space to play with, so we're going to make sure that there's plenty of cover and dense vegetation away from paths and busier areas that will remain relatively undisturbed. The large extent of new habitat created as part of the scheme will also allow wildlife populations to increase in size, which will make them more resilient to disturbance. In terms of the built environment, there are many opportunities to create roosting, nesting and foraging resources for wildlife, as well as create a pleasant environment for people to live. This is really important because there are plenty of species that can thrive in more urban environments if the resources are there. We want to make the most of every part of the site, not just the sang and green spaces, and we want them to be well connected. These photos illustrate just a small selection of the kinds of suggestions people made last time regarding wildlife features. For example, houses and other kinds of structure can easily have integrated bird and bat bricks like the Swift brick shown here. Bug hotels can be installed just about anywhere. Street planting can provide plants for pollinators, and fruit trees in parks and gardens are great for birds and insects. Green roofs can also be used in clever ways, for example on numerous small structures such as cycle stores, bus stops and bin stores, as well as on large structures. Everything adds up. The Taylor Wimpey team have encouraged us to be really creative and innovative where designing for biodiversity is concerned, so please do let us have your ideas. Maybe you know about some local initiatives or groups we could talk to. Maybe you have some ideas yourself about biodiversity features we could incorporate. Perhaps we could provide each new household with a with a guide to wildlife friendly gardening. The possibilities are endless, so please let us have your ideas and thoughts. That's all from me for now, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about ecology and biodiversity later on. And I'm now going to hand you over to Mark, who's going to talk to you about stewardship and legacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. My name is Mark Patchett. I'm a specialist in stewardship, legacy, and associated charitable trusts within new housing developments. All of the facilities that my colleagues have described, including the SANG, the children's play areas, community buildings, sports and leisure facilities, and all the public open space, will need to be maintained and managed in perpetuity after Taylor Wimpey have finished and left. To do so, Taylor Wimpey intend to create a new stewardship and legacy organisation to both manage all those public facilities and to use those facilities to create a strong sense of community. This is the proposal we put forward before and was supported by 97% of responses in the July consultation. The image on screen shown is the front image of the website of a very successful legacy trust that I set up 10 years ago in Chichester. And other images used within the following stewardship slides are also live examples of successful community trusts. At Wisley Airfield, all of the community assets will be transferred to this new stewardship organisation. But it will not just be about the ownership and maintenance of all the public facilities. The organisation will also host events, activities, and encourage new community groups, all designed to create that strong sense of community. This will require working with all stakeholders, parish councils, existing and new local residents, Ockham Parish Church, sports and community groups, Vivid, and of course the local authority. And that's not just for the new residents of Wisley Airfield, but also for the existing residents within the surrounding areas, enabling integration within the new settlement and between the new and existing communities. This new organisation will be a charitable trust, accountable to residents and other relevant stakeholders, employing maintenance and community development staff and managing its own resources. We intend to ensure that facilities and activities at Wisley Airfield complement those in neighbouring parishes. Ideally, we would like to see full integration where new residents use shops, facilities, places of worship in the surrounding areas and vice versa. And we're open to guidance and suggestions from this consultation as to how you might see integration being taken forward. The Trust will be an enabling organisation, empowering and supporting residents to take initiative, to know their neighbours, start clubs and activities, and to help build that sense of community. Taylor Wimpey will ensure that the whole new settlement is sustainable, socially, ecologically, and environmentally. And we want existing and new residents to help set the agenda, and so welcome any thoughts or insights as to what that might be within this stewardship and legacy strategy. I'll now pass back over to Antonis.
Thank you, Mark, and to the rest of the team for providing the overview as to where we are with the current emerging plan and our thoughts and ideas. We're now reaching the Q&A part of the presentation this evening, and I just wanted to have a brief 2-minute break, if that's okay, before we reconvene at 7:30, where we look forward to receiving some of your questions. Thank you for those who have already submitted the questions, and indeed we'll do our best to answer those. Thank you. So thank you very much. I will now start reviewing some of the questions that we've received, if that's okay. So we've had a quick question here for Anonymous. Please, can you say when this presentation will be available on your website, which is a good one to start with. So we will be uploading the presentations after this Saturday's session. So by Monday, both recordings will be on our website. So that's www.wisley-airfield.com. The next question we have had from an anonymous person is, how many pets will people have? This will affect the species in the sang. Will there be any measures to stop this? Rebecca, is that okay if you could kindly answer that question? Hello, Rebecca?
Oh, sorry, I'm
That's
just
okay.
closing windows so I can see things properly.
No, that's okay.
Oh, technology. So can you just repeat that again? Sorry, Antonis.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no problem. How many pets will people have? This will affect the species in the sang. Will there be any measures to stop this?
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
So SANGs are designed to provide alternative open space to the SPA, with a key user group being dog walkers. And SANG creation also offers a huge opportunity to create new wildlife habitats that will be connected to existing habitats within the wider landscape. So there's therefore no objective to create barriers to public access, access for dogs or indeed the movement of cats or wildlife. But due to the large area of habitat creation proposed, the availability of semi-natural habitat capable of providing resources for the wildlife populations present on site, in my view, will significantly increase, and so will the sizes of the populations using that habitat. Structural habitat diversity, the creation of habitat mosaics and the provision of dry, well-maintained paths that people will preferentially use will ensure that parts of the new green space created will remain relatively undisturbed. Based on EPR's experience of creating sites like this elsewhere, so, EPR have delivered numerous SANGs around the Thames Basin, Heath and elsewhere, where we monitor both the use of the SANG and the wildlife populations that we create. I have no doubt that the wildlife populations present in the future at the Wisley Airfield site will be significantly increased as a result of the proposals, despite access by people and pets.
Thanks, Becky. There's been a question from, sorry, just before, I've noted that, is it Melanie and Colin have put their hand up. If you wanted to submit your question in the Q&A, I'll be able to see that and answer that question, if that's okay. Another question that we have received is in regards to, you have shown a possible bus link to West Byfleet going down Wisley Lane. As a resident of Wisley Lane, how do you intend to get a bus over the canal at the Anchor Pub? I don't know if Colin, Mackay or Lee wanted to answer that question.
Antonis, I think I can possibly lead off on that one. I think the plan that you saw that bus link on was the SPD document that Guildford Borough Council produced, which was based on their initial ideas of connectivity to the surrounding community. I know the site and the surroundings very well. I've been up Wisley Lane as well, and I know exactly what happens at the crossing there. There is frankly no chance of getting a bus over that crossing. It's barely wide enough to get a family car across. It wouldn't be our intention to serve to send a bus up Wisley Lane. It was an option that Guildford put out there, but it's one that I think we'll be discounting for that single reason.
Thank you, Colin. We've had another question from David. So can you say who will be providing the Burnt Common Slip Road access to the A3? So again, that's probably one for yourself, Colin, or Lee, actually.
I think I can kick off, and Colin, you can kind of jump in. The Burnt Common Slips or alternative mitigation will be funded by TW. I mean, Colin, it is part of our infrastructure budget, and it's part of the mitigation for the Wisley Airfield. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Colin.
Not a great deal, Lee. What I will say is that because this Burnt Common Slips scheme involves a connection onto the strategic road network, it does involve Highways England, of course, in that process. Highways England, as you could probably guess if you're not already aware, they have their own processes for ensuring that new schemes and connections onto the trunk road network are the best solution, and that they're also robust and deliverable. So we'll be starting a stakeholder engagement process shortly to engage people's ideas on that whole question and move that forwards over the next few months to get to a position where Highways England can feel comfortable with that as a solution onto their network. And that's an additional process that we need to go through as part of this this whole story on mitigation.
Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you.
We've had a question from Joanne. What are the timescales for the first homes to be built, for the first new resident to move in, and for the whole development to be completed? Camille, probably a question for yourself in regards to where we are with planning. Is that okay if you could kindly answer Joanne's question?
Yes, of course. Thanks, Adonis. So, Joanne, good question. So we'll be looking to submit our outline planning application by the second quarter of 2021. We will then need to submit and have approved our first RMA. And that's a reserved matters application to allow us to start building. Lee, did you want to touch on the sort of development programme?
Yeah, absolutely. I can answer a couple of questions really with regards to this, because any development, any construction will always cause a bit of disruption. Doesn't matter what you do, it's part of it. But what we do mitigate it. One of the things we're looking at the moment, as you're aware, the DCO works, major works on the A3 and M25 are undertaken by Highways England potentially. We're waiting on a decision for that. But what we're doing, we're discussing with them how we can share construction accesses so we do not give much disruption to the local area. So we're trying to mitigate where we can. The overall build programme, give or take, is going to be about 10 years, maybe 12 years, depending on market conditions and depending on obviously varying different factors. So where we can, we will mitigate to obviously least disrupt obviously residents of the area.
And I think as well, Lee, just to add, we have formed the community liaison group, which obviously we do plan on hoping to continue to meet to discuss local concerns. We've also had our first neighbourhood discussion meeting, which was held in October. And again, the intention is to continue those neighbourhood discussion meetings so that we can liaise with our neighbours who will obviously need to know as to the activities on the site. A question for, there is a question from James. How can you encourage people to cycle and walk in the cold and rain? So it's probably for Martin Higgins, if that's okay.
Hi. Yeah, well, obviously there's not that much we can do directly about the weather, but it's very important about this habitual thing that if we get people into a lifestyle, into a habit of using sustainable modes by offering them on day one in the development, we increase their loyalty to those modes. And I've worked on different projects around the country where people who get committed to cycling and walking regularly become quite resilient, and so actually their level doesn't drop off as much as you might think. Obviously, when the weather's particularly nasty, and let's say for the sake of argument you're travelling to Horsley or Effingham Junction station, there will be the bus there on those days.
Thank you, Martin. There's been a question from an anonymous person. What play provision will there be for teenagers? So Sam Hart, I don't know if you wanted to answer that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thanks, Sam. Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Yes, in regards with teenage provision, we're set out within policy are to the quantum, but in terms of what we would be providing, looking at the types of equipment and space that would encourage more activities within teenagers. So we'd perhaps be looking at things like Mugas, which are multi-use games areas, skateboard areas, BMX tracks, those sort of things. And they'll all be in areas that will have lots of natural surveillance and space, and also including things such as seating shelters and benches so that they can all be in a secure and safe environment. But again, I mean, with a lot of these things, we're open to any suggestions as to what people think would work and what their teenagers would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was a question we asked at one of the community liaison group meetings, actually. So please do, if there are any suggestions of things we could incorporate into the master plan, do let us know. There's been a further question in regards, and I think it's probably applicable to a few of the panels, if that's okay. Where will village residents park cars? Will there be any on-street parking within the proposed communities? And how will this interact with provision of private and public electric car charging points? So I don't know, Camille, did you want to outline the parking policy as to where we are? And then maybe Graham could discuss about where we've got to with some of the proposals for parking.
Yeah, sure. So from a planning policy point of view, we've got the local plan, which is really geared towards sustainable development and using other initiatives and other transport modes than just being reliant on the car. We also then need to take into account the Lovelace neighbourhood plan, which has its own parking standards. And there's also the emerging development management SPD, which will have its own parking standards also. So this is a point that we are discussing with Guildford to make sure that there's, where both sides are comfortable with the parking provision. But it's something that we really want to think about and be quite clever with and really push that sustainable transport, exactly what Martin was saying, that behavioural change. So make it easier for people to use a different mode than jumping the car. If I can hand over to Graham at this point.
Thanks, Camille. I think you've covered many of the issues there in terms of the requirements for parking. So yes, there will be on-street parking for visitors, and yes, there will obviously be private parking for homes, a lot of which will be off-street. We are also considering how we might allow for possible changes in the future. People might want to have cars now, they might not want to have them in the future, or they may have a different way due to a modal shift. So is it possible to have car parking spaces on the site, on your plot, that could be converted later to something else? Or is it possible to put in garages that can be converted to a workspace at a later date? And it may be that some of those dedicated plots might have their own sort of separate area. We might add in some little parking courts at the end of a house where a third or a second space might be, depending on the requirements of the homes. I don't know, Colin, is there anything you want to say on the electric charging points on that?
Yes, thanks, Graham. I can add just a few extra details if that's helpful for people. Obviously, the government announcements about the change towards electric cars, hybrid vehicles from 2030 is very, very fresh in the headlines at the moment. There is very strong movement towards electric cars, and what comes with them is the need to charge them up, obviously. Our very strong view on this site is that we should comply with the planning policies that are set out, as we are with all the other policies. The Surrey and Guildford aspiration in policy terms is to provide each property with a charging point on plot, and that's a fast charging point, so probably a 7 kilowatt charging point, which charges a vehicle up in as little as 4 hours. So any off-street parking, such as communal parking spaces, places like the village centre, etc., will also be provided with charging points, opportunity charging points, probably of the rapid charging variety. Obviously, all this needs to be worked into the overall infrastructure requirements for the site, and obviously the national grid supply as well that needs to go with that. But certainly the intention here and the necessity really is to provide for people's growing use of electric cars over the next few decades.
Thank you, Colin. We have had a question in regards to site access. So are you providing access to this site from Ockham Lane? If I get up the most recent framework plan, Graham or Camille, did you want to give a quick overview in regards to what is in the local plan, the SPD, in regards to access for the site?
Yeah, no, sure. Thanks, Antonis. So in terms of the SPD, it sets out the main access, which is from the Wisley Lane diversion, exactly where Adonis's hand is now. And that will go through the site to Old Lane on the other side there. But it also has a no-through access on Ockham Lane, exactly where Adonis is pointing. And so that sits within the Hallam, within the land represented by Hallam. Sorry, excuse me. And that is, as I said, a no-through access. So that would just be for that parcel of development there. And that's what we are seeking to maintain.
Thanks, Camille. I've just seen there's a few hands raised, I think, Richard and Colin. Again, if you could kindly submit your question on the Q&A, we will obviously ask those questions. Thank you. What sort of businesses will there be on site? So again, I think this is probably a question for a numerous amount of people on the call. Graham, is it worth just quickly giving an overview as to what we've currently allowed for in the neighbourhood centre area? Again, it is outlined in the local plan.
Sure. Well, as part of the allocation, there's a number of employment opportunities that we will be providing for. So that includes some larger business units, which will probably be located close to the A3, and these are sort of more of your warehouse and distribution type businesses that need access to the main road. Within the neighbourhood centre, there will be more office type developments, and I think I mentioned in the presentation we're exploring this idea of an innovation centre which provides flexible office accommodation. So you can hire out a desk space or a meeting room, or get your photocopying done to support people who are likely to be doing more working from home or close to home in the future. Of course, there are also opportunities there. We're looking at a food store and a number of shops and cafes. So there's also opportunities for business uses to come in those points.
If I can just add on to exactly what Graham's just explained there, this is a key part that's really important to us from a placemaking perspective. We've got Bart and Wilmot on board who are analysing the communities sitting around our development site to really understand how we can complement those communities and you know, what can we offer on our site that would be of a benefit to everybody. So that's something we'd really like feedback on. If anyone does have any ideas or thoughts on that, I would really like to hear.
Thanks, Camille. Thanks, Graham. There's a quick question here for, again, anonymous person. What kind of sports pitches will be built? Probably a question for Sam, if that's okay. Do appreciate we are currently looking at what opportunities there are. Again, as Camille, leading off from what Camille said, really complementing the existing facilities around the former Wisley Airfield. But Sam, is it worth running over what we've currently shown on the master plan?
Right, I might need to pick Graham's brains a little bit on this one as well.
Yeah.
So at the moment, again, we're tied to policy to the amount of sports pitches provision that we need to provide. We're looking at, as Graham showed, putting the sports pitches at the moment into the former hangar area, because we've got a level surface there already, and it sort of lends itself to that land use. We've also looking at, there'll be a variety of pitches allowing for different sports, all year round use in the evenings. So it's still something that we're working through, and again it's looking at what's available in the local community, what people come forward that they feel that they need and that's missing within the catchment area for them. Graham, have you got anything?
I'd just say that at this stage, we've got some quite large areas of green pitch area in the hangar area, and we design that in a flexible way at the moment. So we're looking at a number of different sports that can be provided in different ways on those sports fields. So it's a flexible approach at this stage, and you know, as we discover what is actually required, then we can put more detail into that. We've also, of course, there's the opportunity for some junior sports pitches over in the Eastern Greenway, and this helps to distribute those sports pitches around, so you can still kick a ball around when you're, the other side of the development from the main sports pitches. And the third point, of course, is that we're providing opportunities there, a site there for a school, which will also have pitches, and the intention is for those pitches to be made available for community use as well through appropriate management. So yeah, a variety. The all-weather pitches can accommodate a whole range of sports, from tennis through to netball and basketball and football as well. So
I'd just like to say, if you've got any good ideas or you think something should be included, please let us know, because we're looking for ideas. I mean, we're quite open to suggestions, so please let us know.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Sam. A question for Mark Patchett, if we may. How will the community trust be funded? So appreciate we're still very early stages, but absolutely something at the forefront of our mind, especially with the emerging plan. But Mark, is it worth just maybe running through some potential options?
Sure, yeah, we've got to obviously work through the detailed financial model because obviously the principle is it must be fully sustainable, both in the short and the long term. Just going to the long term, when Taylor Wimpey have finished the site and left and everything's got to be funded, there'll be probably 2 or 3 main sources to that, one of which is a resident contribution. So there will be all the residents on the site making a contribution, but that will be only for part of the cost, because clearly a lot of the facilities will be used by many others of the public, and certainly those from the surrounding communities that will use them. And so obviously not reasonable that the new residents should pay for that. So that'll be funded through some form of endowment. So there'll be commercial assets or income generating assets, let's put it that way, that will provide additional income in order to fund or make some contributions towards those, what I call public or strategic assets, which will be used by the wider community. And of course, the third category there is obviously some user charges. So there'll be a community centre, community facilities, sports pitches, and there'll be what I call affordable charges for those. We make sure that all sorts of different community groups can use those, but income coming from those uses. And of course, then during the build up to it, whilst Taylor Wimpey are on site, there'll be growing amounts of income coming through from those other sources, but not necessarily enough to cover all of it. So Taylor Wimpey will be funding the startup of the trust, and making sure that all the costs as we go through that development period are met, to make sure that everything balances the books and the whole thing is sustainable right the way through. So, as I say, clearly we've got to work on the long-term financial model, but that's the approach we'll be taking to make sure it works right through from the start to finish.
Thank you, Mark. And I think it's really important to say that Taylor Wimpey, this will be one of our legacy schemes should it be approved. And I think the benefit of having Mark on the team right from the beginning is really ensuring that all of our decisions are informed, the strategy to ensure it is robust and is a scheme that we're proud of. There's been a question from John. We hear that existing foul sewage facilities are unable to cope with the proposed development. What is happening on this front? I think it would be really useful.
I can come into that.
I thought it was Lee. Yeah, no problem.
With any development of this size, doesn't matter where it is in the country, off-site infrastructure generally always has to be upgraded to cater for not just this particular development, but other developments in the area. And we're talking to the incumbent providers, including Thames Water to understand what that looks like. So there will be inevitably an upgrading of a system along the way, and also the services providing the site and the wider area.
Thank you, Lee. We found a question from David. At present, 50% of children in our area attend private schools. Will this affect your school proposals on the site? So again, I think it's important to give an overview, Camilla, as to where we are with our discussions with Surrey County Council. And then indeed, I think, Graham, just to highlight our thinking on the master plan in regards to provision for education. So maybe Camille first, if I may.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So when it comes to planning policy, the private schools aren't taken into account for the child yield and the school places that are needed. So at the moment, we are discussing with Surrey County Council about the child yield. That's across our site and all the strategic sites. So our policy says that we need to provide a primary school, and the need of a secondary school will be confirmed at the time a planning application is submitted. So we are accounting for land for an all-through school, which Graham will take us through, because we think it's really important, and it's a big part of, you know, the heart of the community. But at the moment, we're still working with Surrey County Council to understand what the requirement is and how big such a school should be. Thanks, Graham. Would you like to take from there?
Yes. Okay. So what we've allowed for at the moment is a two-form entry primary school. So two forms in each year, and a four-form of entry secondary school. So 4 forms. So that's about 600 pupils. Secondary school, about 400 and maths 420, isn't it? Primary school children, and they're on an all-through model, which means that they go from nursery school all the way through to secondary education on the same site. So this is what we've allowed for. Obviously, the decision for the school is taken more by the local education authority, so we'll be working through those discussions. And what we've done here is we've used those school buildings to create a sense of community. So the primary school sits in a sort of a community focused area at the top of the neighbourhood centre, next to the senior living, next to the community centre, and the secondary element of the school has a separate entrance which is close to one of the village greens, and I think that's important. And as I said before as well, the community benefit of the school is also in its sports provision that can be used out of hours by the local community.
If I could just add there, sorry, Adonis, if I could just add there, we're also looking at the early years provision, so not forgetting that younger age group, and they will be looked after on the site also.
Thanks, Camille. Thanks, Graham. Just mindful for time, so the last question, if I may, from Doug. Please note, however, if any of you have put your hands up but not submitted in the Q&A, please do. As I mentioned, we will be answering all questions that aren't answered this evening on our Q&A document. But Doug finally has asked, have you decided which stations you will construct cycle routes to? I suggest the site needs routes to one station on the Effingham line and one off the Woking line. So probably to finish with you, Colin, if that's okay.
Yes, Antonis, I can answer on that, and maybe Martin might have something to add. We're certainly aiming to satisfy the policy requirements in this regard. So, Doug, we'll be looking at all the destinations, including stations, and constructing routes to certainly the policy requirements. So at the moment there are proposals to take us down to Horsley Station, which actually is a great destination to focus on, because it has the double benefit of being a local centre as well. So for people cycling to or from the site to East Horsley, they can take advantage of the commercial centre there, the retail opportunities, it's a great place as well, and also has the benefit of a railway station which is on that Effingham line, so we can hit two birds with one stone, if you like, in going to that destination. And we think we can come up with a route that satisfies the policy requirement of a route that is suitable for bikeability level 2 cyclists to that destination. We're also looking at routes to West Byfleet along Wisley Lane. Again, there are treatments that we can bring in place on Wisley Lane, which is a fairly lightly trafficked road beyond obviously the RHS access, and the focus there will be to use the existing infrastructure to get up to West Byfleet with suitable enhancements along the way.
Thank you, Colin. So I think that concludes the Q&A session. So thank you to everyone that has kindly submitted questions this evening. As I mentioned, please do continue to add on to the Q&A just while I run through the next steps. So as I've mentioned, the website or the recordings will be uploaded onto our website on Monday. After the Saturday consultation event. Please do feel free to sign up to that Saturday event. It starts at 10 o'clock, and we appreciate there's a lot of information to consider, but indeed I think the importance of uploading the recordings is so that when you're filling out your feedback form, you can review that content at your leisure. So Q&A document will be uploaded onto our website Friday the 27th of November. As I mentioned, in December of this year, we'll have our next design review panel. So that's design review panel 2. And then in early 2020, we look forward to coming back to the community to show how the emerging master plan has evolved following this consultation and all the subsequent feedback. And then, as I mentioned, the second quarter of 2021 is when we're hoping to submit our outline application. So thank you very much. Please do fill out the feedback forms. That they will be emailed to you and uploaded onto our website on Monday. Sign up to our newsletters if you haven't already been receiving those, and please do attend all future events. If there is anything you want to speak to myself or the rest of the team, please do contact us. Our contact information is on the website and indeed on our newsletters as well. But thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you for your time all. And Doug, I think your idea of a paddle tennis club is great, by the way. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.